Hello and welcome to the Sleepy Hustle. Tonight we're diving into one of the most transformative books of our time, a guide that's helped millions rethink how change truly happens. It doesn't promise instant success or magic solutions. It offers something better, a simple, lasting path to becoming who you want to be. If you enjoy these gentle lessons on success and personal growth, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It helps so much more than you know. James Clear's Atomic Habits isn't just another self-help book. It's a gentle manifesto for anyone who has ever felt frustrated by their inability to stick to good intentions. It's for those quiet moments when you've wondered why some people seem to effortlessly maintain healthy routines while others struggle with the simplest changes. Clear offers us something beautifully reassuring. The problem isn't you, it's your system. Think about this for a moment. How many times have you set a goal, felt motivated for a few days or weeks, and then slowly watched that motivation fade? How often have you blamed willpower or discipline when things didn't work out? Clear suggests we've been looking at change all wrong. We've been focused on the destination when we should have been designing the journey. The central premise of Atomic Habits rests on a powerful mathematical truth that feels almost magical when you first encounter it. If you can get just 1% better each day, not dramatically better, just slightly better, the compound effect over a year is staggering. 1% daily improvement leads to being 37 times better by year's end. It's like compound interest, but for personal growth. This isn't about pushing yourself to exhaustion or making radical life changes that inevitably collapse under their own weight. It's about understanding that small changes, consistently applied, create remarkable transformations over time. Clear calls this the aggregation of marginal gains, and it's a concept that feels both scientifically sound and deeply comforting. But here's where it gets interesting, and perhaps a little challenging to our instant gratification minds. These small improvements often feel invisible for long stretches. Clear describes this as the valley of disappointment, that frustrating period where you're doing the work but can't see the results yet. It's like an ice cube sitting in a room that's 30 degrees. You raise the temperature to 31 degrees, then 32, nothing happens. But when you reach 32 degrees, the ice begins to melt. The breakthrough moment isn't when the change happens, it's when the change becomes visible. This metaphor resonates deeply because it explains why so many of us give up on good habits just before they would have taken hold. We're working in that invisible zone where progress is happening but hasn't yet crossed the threshold into obvious results. Understanding this pattern can be incredibly liberating. It means that when you don't see immediate results, you're not failing. You're simply in the normal, necessary phase of habit formation. Clear introduces us to what he calls the habit loop, a 4-step pattern that governs all of our behaviours, both good and bad. There's the cue, which triggers the behaviour, the craving, which is the motivational force behind the habit, the response, which is the actual behaviour itself, and finally, the reward, which satisfies the craving and teaches us to repeat the loop in the future. This isn't abstract psychology, it's practical wisdom you can observe in your own life right now. When you see your phone light up with a notification, that's a cue. The craving is your desire to know what the notification contains. The response is picking up the phone and checking it. The reward is satisfying your curiosity and getting that little hit of dopamine. This loop runs automatically, often without conscious awareness. What's beautiful about understanding this cycle is that it gives us leverage points for change. We don't have to rely on willpower or motivation. We can design our environment and our responses to make good habits more likely and bad habits less likely. It's engineering rather than hoping. Clear transforms this habit loop into what he calls the 4 laws of behaviour change. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying. These 4 principles serve as a practical framework for building any habit you want to develop. And their opposites: make it invisible, make it unattractive, make it difficult, make it unsatisfying. Help break habits you want to eliminate. Let's explore the first law. Make it obvious. This is about designing your environment so that the cues for good habits are visible and the cues for bad habits are hidden. It sounds almost too simple to be effective, but the research is clear. Our behaviour is heavily influenced by what we see and what's readily available. Clear shares a story about a friend who couldn't understand why he kept drinking more whiskey than intended. When they examined his environment, the answer became obvious. He had left a bottle of Irish whiskey on his kitchen counter because his liquor cabinet was full. Every time he walked through the kitchen after a long day, there was the visual cue, triggering the craving for relaxation, leading to the response of pouring a drink. Once he made room in the cabinet and put the bottle away, his consumption naturally decreased without any effort or willpower involved. This principle extends far beyond alcohol. If you want to read more, place books where you'll see them. If you want to exercise, lay out your workout clothes the night before. If you want to eat healthier, keep fruits and vegetables at eye level in your refrigerator and put less healthy options in drawers where they're less visible. These aren't revolutionary concepts, but they're profoundly effective because they work with your psychology rather than against it. The flip side is equally powerful. If you want to watch less television, unplug it and put the remote in another room. If you want to check your phone less often, keep it in a different room while you work. If you want to eat fewer cookies, don't keep them in the house. Environmental design isn't about perfection. It's about making the right choice easier and the wrong choice just a little bit harder. Clear also introduces the concept of implementation intentions, which is a fancy way of saying, be specific about when and where you'll do something. Instead of saying, I'll exercise more, you say, I'll go for a 20-minute walk at 7 a.m. in my neighbourhood. This specificity eliminates the mental energy required to decide when and where to act. The decision is already made. This connects to another powerful technique called habit stacking, where you attach a new habit to an existing one. After I pour my morning coffee, I'll write in my journal for 5 minutes. After I sit down for lunch, I'll call someone I care about. After I put on my pyjamas, I'll read for 10 minutes. The existing habit serves as the cue for the new one, creating a natural chain of behaviours. What's particularly soothing about Clear's approach is that it removes the moral judgment from habit formation. You're not lazy or undisciplined if you struggle with habits. You simply haven't designed the right system yet. This reframing transforms frustration into curiosity. Instead of asking, what's wrong with me, you can ask, how can I make this easier? The second law, make it attractive, taps into the fundamental human drive for rewards and social connection. We're more likely to stick with habits that feel appealing, and Clear offers several strategies for increasing a habit's attractiveness. One of the most powerful is what he calls temptation bundling, where you pair something you need to do with something you want to do. For example, you might only listen to your favourite podcast while exercising, or only get your favourite coffee when you're working on an important project. This creates positive associations and makes the habit feel less like work and more like a treat. It's a gentle way of bribing yourself, but it works because it aligns with how our brains are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. Social influence plays an enormous role in making habits attractive. We naturally want to fit in with our tribe, and we tend to adopt behaviours that earn us approval and belonging. If you want to build a reading habit, join a book club. If you want to exercise regularly, find a workout partner or join a fitness community. The social dimension transforms a potentially solitary struggle into a shared journey. This insight about social influence reveals something profound about human nature. We're not just individuals trying to optimize our personal performance. We're social beings whose behaviors are deeply influenced by the people around us. This means that choosing your environment and your social circles is actually one of the most powerful ways to shape your habits and, ultimately, your life. Clear's approach feels different from other habit books because it acknowledges that we're not just rational decision makers. We're emotional beings living in complex environments, influenced by social pressures and evolutionary drives that operate below the level of conscious awareness. By working with these forces rather than against them, we can create lasting change that feels natural rather than forced. As we continue to explore these ideas, remember that this isn't about perfection or dramatic transformation. It's about small, consistent improvements that compound over time. It's about designing systems that make good choices easier and bad choices harder. Most importantly, it's about understanding that lasting change happens not through force or willpower, but through intelligent design and patient consistency. The third law, make it easy, might be the most counterintuitive principle in the entire book. We live in a culture that celebrates difficulty, that equates struggle with virtue. We admire the marathon runner, the entrepreneur working 18-hour days, the student pulling all-nighters. But Clear suggests that when it comes to building sustainable habits, ease is actually our greatest ally. Think about the habits that have stuck in your life without much conscious effort. Brushing your teeth, checking your phone when you wake up, putting on your seatbelt when you get in the car. These behaviours became automatic not because they were difficult, but because they were simple, convenient, and repeated consistently over time. Clear calls this the principle of least effort, and it operates as a quiet force in all our daily decisions. The 2-minute rule emerges from this principle and offers perhaps the most practical advice in the entire book. When you want to start a new habit, scale it down until it takes less than 2 minutes to complete. Want to read more? Don't commit to reading for an hour each night. Commit to reading 1 page. Want to exercise regularly? Don't plan hour-long gym sessions. Commit to putting on your workout clothes. Want to meditate? Don't aim for 20 minutes of mindfulness. Commit to taking 3 deep breaths. This might seem almost absurdly simple, but there's profound wisdom in this simplicity. The goal isn't to read just 1 page forever. The goal is to establish the identity of someone who reads every day. Once you've mastered the art of showing up consistently, you can gradually expand the habit. But first, you must prove to yourself that you can show up at all. There's something deeply comforting about this approach. It removes the performance pressure that kills so many good intentions. You're not trying to be perfect or impressive, you're simply trying to be consistent. And consistency, Clear reminds us, is more valuable than intensity when it comes to long-term change. The 2-minute rule also works with our psychology in subtle but powerful ways. Starting is often the hardest part of any activity. Once you've put on your running shoes, you're more likely to go for a walk. Once you've opened a book, you're more likely to read more than 1 page. Once you've sat down to meditate, you're more likely to continue for longer than 3 breaths. The rule creates momentum, and momentum is one of the most underrated forces in personal development. Clear shares the story of a photography professor who divided his class into 2 groups. One group would be graded on the quality of a single, perfect photograph. The other group would be graded on the quantity of photos they produced, with more photos earning higher grades. At the end of the semester, the quantity group had produced not only more photos, but better photos. While the quality group spent their time theorizing about perfection, the quantity group spent their time practicing, learning, and improving through repetition. This story illustrates a principle that runs throughout atomic habits. You cannot optimize what you haven't established. Many of us get caught in the trap of trying to perfect a habit before we've even made it consistent. We spend more time planning the perfect workout routine than actually exercising. We researched of simply eating more the ideal diet instead of vegetables. We debate the best time management system instead of just focusing on one important task. The concept of gateway habits extends this idea even further. These are small behaviours that naturally lead to larger ones. Putting on your running shoes is a gateway to exercise. Opening your laptop is a gateway to writing. Taking one book off the shelf is a gateway to reading. These tiny actions might seem insignificant, but they're actually decision points that shape what happens next. Environmental design plays a crucial role in making habits easy. Clear tells the story of a Dutch researcher who wanted to encourage the people to take stairs instead of the elevator. Instead of putting up motivational posters or offering rewards, they simply made the stairs more visible and accessible while making the elevator slightly less convenient. Stair usage increased dramatically without any appeals to willpower or conscious decision-making. This principle applies beautifully to personal habit formation. If you want to drink more water, keep a water bottle on your desk. If you want to take vitamins, put them next to your coffee maker. If you want to practice guitar, keep the guitar in your living room rather than in a case in the closet. These small adjustments to your environment can have disproportionate impacts on your behaviour. The inverse is equally powerful for breaking bad habits. Clear shares the remarkable story of Victor Hugo, who was struggling to finish writing The Hunchback of Notre Dame. His solution was wonderfully dramatic and effective. He gave all his clothes to his assistant and asked to have them locked away, keeping only a large shawl. Since he couldn't leave his house without proper clothing, he had little choice but to stay home and write. He finished the book on schedule. While most of us won't go to Hugo's extremes, the principle remains sound. Make bad habits harder to perform. Remove the cookies from your kitchen counter. Delete social media apps from your phone. Cancel subscriptions to services that don't serve your goals. Put your television remote in another room. These aren't acts of deprivation. They're acts of intelligent design. The fourth and final law, make it satisfying, addresses perhaps the most challenging aspect of habit formation, the gap between action and reward. Our brains are wired to seek immediate gratification, but most good habits deliver their benefits in the future. Exercise makes you feel better over weeks and months, not minutes. Saving money builds wealth over years, not days. Eating healthy foods improves your health gradually, not instantly. This creates what Clear calls the immediate return environment versus the delayed return environment problem. We evolved in a world where immediate returns were crucial for survival. Finding food, avoiding danger, and securing shelter provided instant feedback. But in our modern world, many of the behaviours that serve us best have delayed returns. This mismatch between our wiring and our environment is why so many people struggle with habits. The solution isn't to fight our nature, but to work with it. Clear suggests adding immediate rewards to delayed return habits. After you exercise, you might watch an episode of your favourite show. After you save money, you might transfer a small amount to a fun money account for immediate spending. After you eat a healthy meal, you might check off a box on a habit tracker and feel the satisfaction of visual progress. Habit tracking emerges as one of the most powerful tools for making habits satisfying. There's something deeply rue on a calendar or checking off a complete ordering about marking an XD habit on your phone. It transforms an abstract behaviour into concrete visual progress. The act of tracking itself becomes a reward, creating a positive feedback loop that encourages consistency. But Clear warns against making tracking too complicated. He suggests focusing on your most important habits rather than trying to track everything. The goal is to create satisfaction and momentum, not to become obsessed with metrics. Sometimes, the most important progress can't be easily measured, and that's perfectly fine. The concept of identity-based habits weaves throughout all four laws, but it deserves special attention because it represents a fundamental shift in how we think about change. Instead of focusing on what you want to achieve, Clear suggests focusing on who you want to become. Instead of saying, I want to lose 20 pounds, you might say, I want to become someone who takes care of their body. Instead of I want to write a book, you might say, I want to become a writer. This shift might seem subtle, but it's profound. When you focus on outcomes, you're always chasing something external. When you focus on identity, you're reinforcing something internal. Every action becomes a vote for the type of person you want to be. Every time you choose the salad over the burger, you're voting to be someone who values health. Every time you write a paragraph, you're voting to be a writer. Every time you put money in savings, you're voting to be financially responsible. These votes accumulate over time, gradually shifting your sense of self. You don't need dramatic transformation or life-changing events. Small, consistent actions repeated over time create identity change. And once your identity shifts, the behaviours that align with that identity become easier and more automatic. This process works in reverse as well. The stories we tell ourselves about who we are shape our behaviour. If you think of yourself as someone who's not good with money, you'll find ways to prove that story true. If you think of yourself as not a morning person, you'll resist waking up early. If you think of yourself as not athletic, you'll avoid physical activity. Clear suggests that changing these identity stories requires evidence. You can't simply decide to see yourself differently and expect it to stick, but you can accumulate small pieces of evidence that gradually shift your self-perception. Each tiny behaviour is proof of your changing identity. Each small success builds confidence for the next small success. The beauty of this approach is that it's both gentle and powerful. You're not trying to become a completely different person overnight. You're simply collecting evidence that you're already becoming the person you want to be. It's less about dramatic change and more about gentle evolution, one small choice at a time. As these ideas settle into your mind like soft thoughts before sleep, remember that Atomic Habits isn't really about habits at all. It's about the quiet, persistent power of small changes to transform not just what you do, but who you are. It's about understanding that the most profound changes often happen so gradually that they're invisible until suddenly they're undeniable. Perhaps the most profound insight in Clear's work is the recognition that we often approach change backward. We focus on what we want to have or what we want to achieve when we should be focusing on who we want to become. This shift from outcome-based thinking to identity-based thinking changes everything about how we approach personal development. When you think about it, most of the habits that have naturally stuck in your life aren't tied to specific goals. You don't brush your teeth because you're trying to achieve perfect dental health by a certain date. You brush your teeth because you're someone who values cleanliness and health. You don't check your email because you have a goal to read a certain number of messages. You check it because you see yourself as someone who stays connected and responsive. This distinction reveals something beautiful about human nature. We're not just goal-seeking machines, we're identity-protecting creatures. We act in ways that reinforce our sense of who we are, and we resist behaviours that conflict with our self-image. This means that lasting change isn't really about changing what you do, it's about changing how you see yourself. Clear suggests that every habit is really a vote for a particular identity. When you make your bed, you're voting to be organised. When you write a sentence, you're voting to be a writer. When you choose water over soda, you're voting to be health conscious. These individual votes might seem insignificant, but they accumulate over time into a clear electoral outcome: your identity. The democratic metaphor is particularly fitting because it removes the pressure of perfection. In any election, not every vote goes to the winning candidate, but the majority determines the outcome. Similarly, you don't need to perform a habit perfectly to embody that identity. You just need to win the majority of votes. If you write 3 days out of 5, you're still predominantly a writer. If you exercise 4 times a week instead of 7, you're still fundamentally someone who values fitness. This understanding can be profoundly liberating for those of us who struggle with all or nothing thinking. Many people abandon habits entirely after a single missed day because they feel like they've broken their streak or failed their commitment. But Clear's framework suggests that a single missed vote doesn't determine the election. What matters is the overall pattern, the general direction of your choices over time. The process of identity change happens gradually, almost imperceptibly. You don't wake up one morning suddenly transformed into a new person. Instead, small actions accumulate like sediment, slowly building new layers of self-perception. A person who has never exercised doesn't immediately see themselves as athletic after one workout, but after weeks of consistent movement, something shifts. The internal narrative begins to change from "I'm not a fitness person" to "I'm someone who's getting in shape" to eventually "I'm someone who prioritizes my health." This gradual transformation explains why sustainable change feels different from dramatic change. Dramatic change is often forced and unsustainable because it conflicts with existing identity. It's like trying to act out of character in a play. You can do it for a while, but it feels artificial and exhausting. Sustainable change, on the other hand, feels natural because it aligns with your evolving sense of self. Clear introduces the concept of keystone habits, behaviours that naturally trigger positive changes in other areas of life. These are particularly powerful because they often reshape identity in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Exercise, for example, doesn't just make you more physically fit. It often makes you feel more disciplined, more energetic, more capable of tackling other challenges. Reading regularly doesn't just expand your knowledge, it reinforces an identity as someone who values learning and growth. Sleep emerges as perhaps the most fundamental keystone habit because it affects virtually every other behaviour in your life. When you're well rested, you have better self-control, clearer thinking, more stable emotions, and greater physical energy. All of these factors make it easier to maintain other positive habits. Conversely, when you're sleep deprived, everything becomes more difficult. Healthy eating requires more willpower, exercise feels more challenging, and patience becomes scarce. This interconnectedness of habits reveals something profound about human behaviour. We're not collections of isolated behaviours, but integrated systems where each element influences every other element. This means that sometimes the most effective way to change one area of your life is to focus on a different area entirely. Someone struggling with emotional eating might find more success by improving their sleep schedule than by focusing directly on their diet. Someone having trouble with procrastination might discover that regular exercise provides the mental clarity and energy needed for better focus. The systems thinking approach to habits also helps explain why willpower feels so unreliable. When we rely purely on willpower, we're essentially trying to override our natural tendencies through force. This works sometimes, but it's exhausting and unsustainable. When we design systems that align with our psychology and support our desired identity, change feels more effortless because we're working with our nature rather than against it. Clear emphasizes that the environment plays a crucial role in shaping behavior, but he extends this concept beyond physical spaces to include social environments. The people you spend time with, the conversations you have, the media you consume, all of these factors influence your habits and your identity. If you're surrounded by people who complain constantly, you're more likely to develop a habit of complaining. If you're surrounded by people who read regularly, you're more likely to become a reader yourself. This social dimension of habit formation suggests that choosing your environment is actually one of the most powerful interventions you can make. Sometimes changing your habits requires changing your social circle, not because the people in your life are bad, but because their habits and attitudes don't align with the person you're trying to become. This can feel difficult because it involves relationship dynamics, but it's often necessary for significant personal change. The concept of habit stacking takes on deeper meaning when viewed through the lens of identity. When you stack a new habit onto an existing one, you're not just creating a behavioural chain, you're extending an existing identity into a new domain. If you already see yourself as someone who drinks coffee every morning, stacking a journaling habit onto that routine leverages your existing identity as a morning person to support your emerging identity as someone who reflects and processes their thoughts. Clear also addresses the challenge of maintaining habits during difficult periods. Life inevitably brings stress, disruption, and unexpected challenges that can derail even well-established routines. The key insight is that during these times, the goal isn't to maintain perfect performance, but to maintain identity. Even if you can't do your full workout routine, you might still put on your exercise clothes. Even if you can't write for your usual 30 minutes, you might still open your notebook and write one sentence. These minimal, viable habits serve as identity anchors during turbulent times. They keep the identity alive even when circumstances make full expression impossible. This approach prevents the all-or-nothing thinking that causes people to abandon habits entirely during challenging periods. Instead of thinking, "I missed 3 days, so I failed," you can think, "I maintained my identity as someone who exercises even during a difficult week." The concept of plateau periods becomes less frustrating when viewed through the identity lens. Instead of focusing solely on external results, you can find satisfaction in the internal transformation that's happening. Each day you show up, each time you choose the behaviour that aligns with your desired identity, you're strengthening neural pathways and reinforcing your sense of self. The external results will eventually follow, but the internal transformation is happening immediately. This patience with the process is perhaps one of the most valuable skills anyone can develop. We live in a culture of instant gratification, where we expect to see immediate results from our efforts. But meaningful change, the kind that lasts, happens on a different timeline. It requires the ability to trust in the process even when you can't see the progress. Clear's approach offers a gentle alternative to the harsh self-improvement culture that often dominates personal development. Instead of demanding perfection, it encourages consistency. Instead of focusing on dramatic transformation, it celebrates small improvements. Instead of relying on motivation and willpower, it emphasizes systems and environment design. There's something profoundly comforting about this approach because it acknowledges the reality of human nature. We're not machines that can be programmed for optimal performance. We're complex beings with emotions, relationships, responsibilities, and limitations. Sustainable change must work within these constraints, not against them. The beauty of atomic habits is that they compound not just behaviourally, but emotionally and psychologically as well. Each small success builds confidence. Each day of consistency reinforces your belief in your ability to change. Each vote for your desired identity makes the next vote easier to cast. Over time, these compounding effects create momentum that makes positive change feel increasingly natural and automatic. As you drift deeper into these ideas, let them settle gently into your subconscious mind. Tomorrow, you don't need to overhaul your entire life or commit to dramatic changes. You simply need to cast one small vote for the person you want to become. One tiny choice that moves you in the direction of your desired identity. One atomic habit that begins the quiet process of transformation. The most remarkable thing about Clear's approach is how it transforms the entire experience of personal development from something harsh and demanding into something gentle and sustainable. It's not about forcing yourself to become someone new. It's about gradually becoming more of who you already are at your best. It's not about perfection. It's about direction. It's not about dramatic change. It's about atomic change. Small and invisible at first, but ultimately powerful enough to split apart your old identity and fuse together something new. The power of Clear's framework becomes even more apparent when we consider how it addresses one of the most persistent challenges in personal development: the gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it. Most of us aren't lacking information about what constitutes healthy behaviour. We know we should exercise, eat well, save money, and manage our time effectively. The challenge isn't knowledge, it's implementation. This implementation gap exists because traditional approaches to change focus on the wrong variables. They emphasize outcomes and rely on motivation, both of which are inherently unstable. Outcomes are often outside our direct control, influenced by factors beyond our actions. Motivation fluctuates like the weather, strong one day and absent the next. Clear's genius lies in redirecting our attention to the only variables we can truly control: our systems and our daily choices. Consider how this plays out in real life. Two people might have identical goals to get in better shape. One person focuses on the outcome, setting a goal to lose 30 pounds in 6 months. They rely on motivation to get to the gym and willpower to avoid unhealthy foods. When motivation wanes or willpower fails, they feel defeated and often abandon their efforts entirely. The other person focuses on systems, committing to putting on workout clothes every morning and keeping healthy snacks visible on their kitchen counter. They're not tracking pounds lost or relying on feeling motivated. They're simply showing up consistently to behaviours that align with their identity as someone who values health. Over time, these different approaches produce dramatically different results. The outcome-focused person experiences a roller coaster of success and failure, making progress when motivated and losing ground when willpower weakens. The system-focused person experiences steady, sustainable progress because their approach doesn't depend on fluctuating internal states. This distinction illuminates why so many New Year's resolutions fail. They typically focus on dramatic outcomes, like losing 50 pounds or saving $10,000, without addressing the underlying systems that would make such outcomes inevitable. The resolution becomes a destination without a map, a wish without a plan. Clear suggests that goals are useful for setting direction, but systems are what deliver results. If you're a coach, your goal might be to win a championship, but your system is the daily practice schedule, the way you develop players, the culture you create. If you're a writer, your goal might be to publish a best-selling novel, but your system is your daily writing routine. Your process for developing ideas, your habits around research and revision. This systems thinking extends beautifully into the realm of identity formation. Your identity isn't determined by your goals or your intentions, it's shaped by your repeated actions. Every time you act in a certain way, you reinforce neural pathways that make similar actions more likely in the future. Your brain literally rewires itself based on what you do consistently. The neuroscience behind this process is both fascinating and encouraging. When you repeat a behaviour, your brain strengthens the neural connections associated with that behaviour through a process called myelination. These strengthened pathways make the behaviour feel more automatic and require less conscious effort over time. What starts as a deliberate choice gradually becomes an unconscious response. This neuroplasticity means that change is always possible, regardless of your age or how long you've been stuck in certain patterns. Your brain remains capable of forming new connections throughout your life. The key is providing it with consistent, repeated experiences that reinforce the patterns you want to establish. However, this same neuroplasticity works in reverse. When you stop performing a behaviour consistently, those neural pathways begin to weaken. This is why it's often easier to restart an old habit than to build a completely new one, but it's also why habits can fade if not maintained. The good news is that once a habit is well established, it tends to be quite durable, requiring less conscious maintenance over time. Clear's approach acknowledges that habit formation isn't just a psychological process, it's a biological one. Your brain is constantly adapting to your environment and your behaviours, literally reshaping itself based on your repeated actions. This means that when you commit to small, consistent changes, you're not just changing your behaviour, you're changing your brain. The concept of environmental design takes on deeper significance when viewed through this neurobiological lens. Your environment isn't just providing cues for behaviour, It's actually shaping your neural development. The spaces you inhabit, the objects you interact with, the people you spend time with, all of these factors influence which neural pathways get strengthened and which ones fade. This understanding can be both empowering and sobering. Empowering because it means you have more control over your development than you might have realized. Sobering because it highlights how your current environment might be reinforcing patterns you want to change. The cluttered desk that makes focus difficult, the social circle that normalizes unhealthy behaviors, the daily routines that reinforce stress rather than calm. Clear emphasizes that changing your environment is often easier than changing your behavior directly. Instead of trying to override your natural responses through willpower, you can design your surroundings to make good choices more likely and bad choices less convenient. This works because it aligns with how your brain actually operates, rather than fighting against your natural tendencies. The social environment deserves particular attention because humans are fundamentally social creatures. We evolved in small groups where fitting in with the tribe was essential for survival. This evolutionary heritage means that social approval and belonging remain powerful motivators, even in our modern individualistic culture. We naturally adopt the behaviours of the people around us, often without conscious awareness. Clear describes 3 primary social influences on habit formation. First, we tend to imitate the habits of people who are close to us. If your family members are regular readers, you're more likely to become a reader. If your friends exercise regularly, you're more likely to develop fitness habits. This proximity effect happens automatically through simple exposure and observation. Second, we tend to adopt the habits of groups we want to belong to. If you admire entrepreneurs, you might start adopting their morning routines or productivity strategies, even before you consider yourself an entrepreneur. This aspirational imitation is a powerful force for positive change when directed consciously. Third, we tend to conform to the habits that are normal within our culture or community. If everyone around you checks their phone constantly, that behaviour feels normal and acceptable. If everyone around you prioritizes learning and growth, those behaviours become the default expectation. These social influences can work for or against your desired changes. If you're trying to build habits that differ from those of your immediate social circle, you'll face additional resistance. Not necessarily overt opposition, but the subtle pressure that comes from standing out or being different. This is why changing your social environment, or at least expanding it to include people who embody your desired behaviours, can be crucial for lasting change. The beauty of understanding these social dynamics is that you can leverage them intentionally. Instead of trying to build habits in isolation, you can seek out communities where your desired behaviours are already the norm. Want to become a writer? Join a writing group. Want to eat healthier? Connect with people who prioritise nutrition. Want to be more physically active? Find workout partners or recreational sports leagues. This community approach transforms habit formation from a solitary struggle into a shared journey. Instead of relying purely on personal discipline, you're supported by social expectations and peer encouragement. The behaviour stops being something you have to force yourself to do and becomes something you naturally do as part of your social identity. Clear also addresses the challenge of habit maintenance during life transitions. Moving to a new city, starting a new job, experiencing a relationship change, having a child. These major life events often disrupt established routines and can derail even well-established habits. The key insight is that habits are more fragile than we often assume, particularly when their environmental supports change. During transitions, the cues that normally trigger your habits might be absent or different. Your usual gym might be across town. Your morning routine might be disrupted by new responsibilities. Your social support system might be temporarily unavailable. These disruptions aren't personal failures. They're natural consequences of environmental change. The solution isn't to rely more heavily on willpower during transitions, but to consciously rebuild the environmental supports for your desired behaviours in your new situation. This might mean finding a new gym, establishing new routines, or connecting with new social groups that support your habits. It requires intentional effort, but it's more effective than hoping your habits will survive purely through determination. This understanding can be particularly liberating for people who feel frustrated by their inability to maintain habits during challenging periods. Instead of viewing disruption as evidence of personal weakness, you can see it as a natural response to environmental change and focus on systematically rebuilding the supports your habits need to thrive. The concept of habit stacking becomes even more powerful when you understand it as a form of environmental design for your internal landscape. By connecting new behaviours to established ones, you're creating internal cues that don't depend on external circumstances. These internal chains of behaviour can be more resilient during transitions because they travel with you regardless of changes in your physical environment. Clear's framework also addresses the role of identity in habit maintenance. When your habits are tied to a strong sense of identity, they become more resilient to disruption. Someone who sees themselves as a reader will find ways to read even when their usual reading time is disrupted. Someone who identifies as health conscious will adapt their eating habits to new circumstances rather than abandoning them entirely. This identity-based resilience develops over time through consistent action. Each time you maintain a habit despite obstacles or inconvenience, you strengthen both the neural pathways associated with the behaviour and your identity as someone who embodies that behaviour. The habit becomes less dependent on perfect conditions and more integrated into your sense of self. The process of identity change through habit formation is gradual and often imperceptible while it's happening. You don't suddenly wake up one day feeling like a different person. Instead, your sense of self shifts slowly, almost like a photograph developing. At first, the image is unclear, but with time and repeated exposure, it becomes sharp and undeniable. This gradual transformation explains why sustainable change often feels anticlimactic. There's no dramatic moment of transformation, no sudden breakthrough where everything clicks into place. Instead, there's a quiet accumulation of evidence that gradually shifts how you see yourself and how others see you. One day, you realize that you've become the kind of person who exercises regularly, or reads consistently, or manages money well, not through force or dramatic change, but through the simple accumulation of repeated actions. The beauty of this process is that it works regardless of your starting point or your past experiences with change. You don't need to have a history of success with habits to begin building new ones. You don't need to overcome deep-seated psychological issues or resolve childhood trauma. You simply need to start casting votes for the identity you want to develop through small, consistent actions. This democratic approach to identity change is both gentle and powerful. It doesn't require you to deny or fight against aspects of yourself you want to change. Instead, it allows you to gradually outvote those aspects through consistent choices that align with your desired identity. Over time, the new identity becomes stronger and more dominant, not through conflict, but through persistent evidence. As these ideas continue to settle into your consciousness, like gentle waves on a quiet shore, remember that the goal isn't to implement everything at once. The goal is to understand the principles deeply enough that you can apply them thoughtfully to your own life. Tomorrow, you don't need to redesign your entire existence. You simply need to make one small choice that aligns with the person you want to become. The most profound insight in Clear's work might be this: lasting, the patient accumulation of tiny change happens, not through dramatic transformation, but through improvements. Each small choice is both insignificant and monumentally important. Insignificant because it barely registers in the moment, Monumentally important because it's part of a larger pattern that's shaping who you're becoming. This paradox of atomic habits, that something so small can ultimately be so powerful, mirrors many of the most important processes in life. Rivers carve canyons through the slow persistence of water over stone. Trees grow from tiny seeds through the daily accumulation of sunlight and nutrients. Relationships deepen through countless small moments of connection and care. Your personal transformation follows the same gentle but inexorable pattern. Each time you choose the behaviour that aligns with your desired identity, you're carving a little deeper into the bedrock of who you are. Each time you show up consistently to your small daily practices, you're growing stronger in ways that aren't immediately visible, but are ultimately undeniable. The invitation of atomic habits isn't to become someone completely different overnight. It's to become slightly more of who you already are at your best, one small choice at a time. It's to trust in the quiet power of consistency and the compound effect of small improvements. It's to understand that the person you're becoming is always just one habit away from the person you are today. As we drift deeper into Clear's wisdom, we encounter one of the most elegant aspects of his approach, the recognition that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of the system. Most of us have been conditioned to see missed days or broken streaks as evidence that we're not cut out for lasting change. Clear offers a different perspective, one that's both scientifically grounded and deeply compassionate. He introduces the concept of never missing twice, which transforms how we relate to inevitable lapses in our routines. The idea is beautifully simple. When you miss a habit once, make your priority getting back on track immediately, rather than dwelling on the mistake or abandoning the habit entirely. Missing once is an accident. Missing twice is the beginning of a new, unwanted habit. This principle acknowledges something profound about human nature. We're not machines programmed for perfect consistency. We get sick. We face unexpected demands. We have bad days. These disruptions are normal parts of life, not character flaws or signs that we're destined to fail. The difference between people who maintain long-term positive changes and those who don't isn't that the successful group never stumbles. It's that they've developed the skill of quick recovery. Think about how this plays out in daily life. Someone committed to daily exercise might miss their workout due to a work emergency. The perfectionist mindset says, "I've broken my streak, so why bother continuing?" The atomic habits mindset says, "I missed today, which makes tomorrow even more important." This subtle shift in thinking prevents single lapses from becoming complete abandonments. The psychological research behind this approach reveals fascinating insights about how our minds process setbacks. When we view a single failure as evidence of our inability to change, we activate what psychologists call the "what the hell" effect. Having already ruined our perfect record, we give ourselves permission to continue making poor choices. It's like deciding that since you ate one cookie, you might as well finish the entire package. Clear's framework interrupts this destructive pattern by normalizing imperfection while maintaining accountability. You don't need to be perfect, but you do need to be consistent over time. A single missed day doesn't erase weeks of progress any more than one healthy meal doesn't create lifelong wellness. What matters is the overall trajectory, the general direction of your choices across weeks and months. This understanding can be profoundly liberating for those of us who struggle with all or nothing thinking. Many people abandon beneficial habits entirely after a single imperfect day because they feel like they've already failed. But Clear's research shows that people who maintain long-term positive changes aren't those who never stumble. They're those who've mastered the art of graceful recovery. The biological reality supports this approach. Your brain doesn't forget a well-established habit pattern after a single day of non-performance. Those neural pathways remain intact, ready to be reactivated when you return to the behaviour. Missing one workout doesn't make you lose all your fitness progress. Skipping one day of reading doesn't eliminate your accumulated knowledge. The infrastructure of positive change is more resilient than we often assume. Clear also addresses something that many habit formation approaches overlook: the role of boredom in maintaining long-term change. After the initial excitement of a new habit wears off, after you've seen some progress but before the behaviour feels completely automatic, there's often a period where the habit feels routine and unremarkable. This is actually a sign that the habit is working, but it can feel disappointing to those expecting continuous motivation and excitement. The most successful people in any field learn to find satisfaction in the process rather than requiring constant novelty or external validation. A professional athlete doesn't need to feel excited about every training session. An accomplished writer doesn't wait for inspiration to strike before sitting down to work. They've developed what Clear calls the ability to stick with the schedule even when it's not convenient. This might seem like a paradox. How can something be both automatic and require conscious commitment? The answer lies in understanding that habits operate on different levels. The basic behavioural pattern can become automatic while still requiring conscious choice to maintain consistency over time. You might automatically put on your running shoes when you wake up, but you still need to consciously choose to maintain that routine when you're travelling or during busy periods. Clear introduces the concept of habit graduation, the process by which behaviours evolve from conscious practices to unconscious patterns. In the early stages, a habit requires significant mental energy and deliberate choice. You have to remember to do it, force yourself through resistance, and consciously navigate obstacles. As the habit becomes more established, it requires less mental energy and feels more natural. Eventually, not performing the habit feels stranger than performing it. This graduation process helps explain why some people seem to maintain healthy behaviours effortlessly, while others struggle constantly. Those who appear to have effortless discipline have simply progressed further along the graduation continuum. Their healthy behaviours have become so daily routines that maintaining integrated into their identity and them requires less conscious effort than abandoning them would. The time frame for habit graduation varies dramatically depending on the complexity of the behaviour, your existing routines, and your environment. Simple habits like taking vitamins with breakfast might feel automatic within weeks. Complex habits like maintaining a comprehensive fitness routine might take months or even years to feel completely natural. Understanding this variability can help set realistic expectations and prevent premature abandonment of beneficial practices. Clear emphasises that the goal isn't to make every positive behaviour completely effortless, but to make them easier than the alternatives. When healthy eating requires less mental energy than constantly battling cravings, when exercise feels more natural than sedentary behaviour, when productive work habits feel more comfortable than procrastination, you've achieved a sustainable equilibrium. The concept of environmental design extends into what Clear calls choice architecture, the way options are presented in our daily lives. Just as grocery stores place candy bars at eye level near checkout counters to encourage impulse purchases, you can design your personal environment to make good choices more prominent and convenient, while making poor choices less visible and accessible. This might involve something as simple as keeping a water bottle on your desk and putting soft drinks in a basement refrigerator, or placing books on your nightstand while keeping your phone charger in another room. These small adjustments to your physical environment can have disproportionate impacts on your behaviour because they work with your natural tendencies rather than requiring constant willpower. The digital environment deserves special attention in our modern context. The apps on your phone's home screen, the websites bookmarked in your browser, the notifications you allow, the social media accounts you follow. All of these digital choices shape your mental environment and influence your daily behaviours. Optimizing your digital space for positive habits can be just as important as organizing your physical space. Clear suggests conducting regular environmental audits, looking around your spaces with fresh eyes to identify cues that promote behaviors you want to encourage and cues that trigger behaviors you want to discourage. This isn't about creating a sterile, joyless environment, but about being intentional with the signals your surroundings send to your subconscious mind throughout the day. The social dimension of environmental design often proves to be the most powerful and the most challenging to optimize. Unlike your physical possessions, you can't simply rearrange the people in your life to support your desired changes. Relationships are complex, and the people closest to you might not immediately understand or support your efforts to change, especially if those changes somehow challenge the existing dynamic. Clear acknowledges that social pressure can be one of the biggest obstacles to positive change, but he also shows how it can become one of your greatest assets. The key is finding what he calls your tribe of people who already embody the behaviors you want to develop. This doesn't mean abandoning existing relationships, but it might mean expanding your social circle to include people who normalize the habits you're trying to build. This social strategy works because it transforms challenging behaviors from acts of discipline into acts of belonging. When you're surrounded by people who read regularly, reading stops feeling like something you have to force yourself to do and starts feeling like something people like you naturally do. When you're part of a community that values health and fitness, taking care of your body becomes an expression of shared values rather than a personal burden. The power of social influence also explains why accountability partners and habit tracking groups can be so effective. When someone else is expecting you to show up or check in, the behavior stops being purely personal and becomes social. You're not just letting yourself down if you skip a day, you're potentially disappointing someone who's invested in your success. However, Clear warns against making accountability too dependent on external validation. The goal is to use social support to establish behaviors that eventually become intrinsically rewarding. If you only exercise because your workout partner expects it, what happens when they move away or lose interest? The most sustainable habits are those that provide internal satisfaction while being supported by external structures. The concept of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation weaves throughout Clear's entire framework. Extrinsic motivators like rewards, punishments, or social approval can be powerful tools for establishing new behaviors, but they have limitations. They can lose their effectiveness over time. They can create dependency, and they can sometimes undermine the internal satisfaction that comes from the behavior itself. Intrinsic motivation emerges when behaviors align with your values, contribute to your sense of competence, and provide a feeling of autonomy. These internally driven behaviors tend to be more sustainable because they don't depend on external circumstances or other people's responses. They persist because they feel meaningful and satisfying in themselves, not because of what they might lead to. Clear's approach skillfully balances these different types of motivation. External structures and rewards can help establish new behaviors, but the ultimate goal is to develop internal appreciation for the behaviors themselves. You might start exercising because you want to lose weight or look better, but lasting fitness habits develop when you begin to value how movement makes you feel, how it clears your mind, how it connects you with your physical body. This transition from external to internal motivation often happens gradually and unconsciously. Someone might begin meditation practice to reduce stress, but eventually find that they value the clarity and presence it brings to all areas of life. A person might start reading to advance their career, but discover a genuine love for learning and ideas. The external motivator serves as a gateway to deeper, more sustainable internal rewards. The beauty of this progression is that it doesn't require you to have pure motives from the beginning. It's perfectly fine to start a habit for shallow or external reasons, as long as you remain open to discovering deeper value along the way. Many of the most meaningful practices in people's lives began with practical or superficial motivations that gradually evolved into something more profound. Clear also addresses the challenge of maintaining habits during life's inevitable ups and downs. Motivation fluctuates like the weather. Some days you feel energized and committed to your goals. Other days you feel tired, discouraged, or overwhelmed by other responsibilities. The key insight is that sustainable habits must be designed to survive your worst days, not just thrive on your best ones. This means building what Clear calls minimum viable habits, scaled down versions of your ideal behaviours that you can maintain even during difficult periods. If your ideal morning routine includes 30 minutes of meditation, 20 minutes of journaling, and a 40-minute workout, what's the absolute minimum version you could do on your most challenging days? Maybe it's 3 deep breaths, writing 1 sentence, and doing 5 push-ups. These minimum versions serve as lifelines during storms. They keep the identity and the neural pathways active even when circumstances make full performance impossible. They prevent the all-or-nothing thinking that causes people to abandon habits entirely during challenging periods. Most importantly, they often serve as gateways back to fuller practice when conditions improve. The concept of seasonal variation in habits acknowledges that our capacity for different behaviours naturally fluctuates throughout the year, throughout our life stages, and in response to changing circumstances. Rather than fighting these natural rhythms, Clear suggests working with them. You might focus more intensively on certain habits during periods when you have more capacity and maintain others at minimum levels during busier or more stressful times. This seasonal approach prevents the frustration and self-judgment that comes from expecting consistent performance across all life circumstances. A parent with young children might maintain different habits than they did before having kids, and that's not a failure. It's an adaptation to new realities. A student during finals week might temporarily simplify their routine to focus on academic demands, then return to fuller practices when the pressure subsides. The wisdom in this approach lies in its sustainability over decades rather than months. People who maintain positive changes throughout their lives aren't those who never experience disruption or challenge. They're those who've learned to adapt their practices to their changing circumstances, while maintaining the underlying commitment to their desired identity. As these gentle insights continue to flow through your awareness like a calm stream, notice how Clear's framework offers something rare in our achievement-oriented culture: permission to be human while still pursuing growth. You don't need to be perfect to make progress. You don't need to have everything figured out before you begin. You simply need to start where you are, with what you have, and trust in the quiet power of consistent, small actions to gradually reshape both your behaviours and your sense of self. The invitation is always the same: one small choice, one tiny vote for the person you're becoming, one atomic habit at a time. The transformation you seek isn't hiding behind some dramatic breakthrough or perfect plan. It's embedded in the ordinary moments, the daily choices, the simple decision to show up consistently to the life you want to create. Tomorrow brings another opportunity to cast your vote, to make your choice, to take one small step toward the identity you're building. And in that beautiful simplicity lies the profound power of atomic habits. Not to change everything at once, but to change everything over time. One gentle, persistent choice after another. As we reach the end of our gentle journey through James Clear's transformative work, let these final thoughts settle into your mind like the last warm rays of evening sunlight. Atomic Habits offers us something precious in our hurried world: the understanding that lasting change doesn't require dramatic gestures or heroic willpower. It happens through the quiet accumulation of small choices, each one casting a vote for the person we're becoming. We've explored the 4 laws that make habits stick: making them obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. We've seen how our environment shapes us more than we realise, how our identity emerges from our repeated actions, and how the smallest improvements compound into remarkable transformations over time. Most importantly, we've learned that the goal isn't perfection, but consistency. Not dramatic change, but atomic change. As you drift off tonight, carry with you this gentle truth. You already have everything you need to begin. Tomorrow doesn't require a complete life overhaul or a perfect plan. It simply asks for one small choice, one tiny habit, one quiet vote for the person you want to become. In that beautiful simplicity lies the profound power of Clear's message. Change happens not in the dramatic moments we imagine, but in the ordinary ones we live, one gentle, persistent choice at a time. Sleep well, knowing that your transformation is already underway.